Well, hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Artist Next Level podcast. Super happy to be here with you. And just like last week, I have with me my good friend Drew Harris. And today, we're going to talk about how to find inspiration for your art.
Resources, inspiring interviews, business practices, and practical advice to take your art career to the next level. Join Sergio Gomez in today's Artist Next Level and get ready to take control of your career.
Drew, good to see you. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, good. Good to see you too. You got your Batman hat on. And I got my White Sox hat on.
Exactly. Well, for our friends who missed last episode, you're gonna go back and check that out in the podcast because we talk about the hats we wear, and we were talking about literally hats. We talk about this Batman hat and your hat collection, and then we talk about the different roles of the artist. It was a really fun conversation. So I'm like, I had to wear a hat again.
Yeah. Well, do you remember the day we picked this hat up? I had to stop on the side of the road. I said, "Hey, there's the hat I want." You stopped the car, and I jumped out. I ran in. I bought the hat. Jumped back into the car. It was like a daylight robbery.
Yeah.
Run in, run out, scram.
Yeah, because I was waiting in the car, like, why's he taking him so long? But I think that there was a story, like you told me, like the guy had like too many hat options or something like that.
It was a hat store. It was a hat store, and I was like in my element. I thought, well, there you go. I couldn't choose, but I had to come away, and considering it was right across from the stadium where the
White Sox Stadium.
So I thought, well, it's got to be a White Sox hat.
Yeah, and you know what?
There you go.
I drive by it every time I go to the gallery, and I have never been to that shop. Now I'm curious. I got to go and get me my own hat.
You must. It's a great shop.
Absolutely. And Drew, I'm super happy to chat today about inspiration. And I think that's something that you and I, we talk a lot behind the scenes. We don't call it perhaps inspiration on a conscious level, but we're always talking about what's happening, behind the scenes in your life, in my life, in our studio, outside of the studio. There are a lot of similarities between you and me that sometimes we wake up with these crazy ideas and then we just go for it. And like, what was I thinking? Where did that come from? There's a lot of things on that, and also often we have talked about the struggles of the artist, like walking in the studio and like, man, I just don't know what to do. Man, I just don't feel it today.
Creative block. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we can pull from those conversations and share with our friends, because I think this idea of inspiration, finding what to do, what to work on when it comes to your art, is something that it takes a while to get a handle on, and particularly, for emerging artists, who may be watching today or listening to the podcast, those stages in which everything feels dry, like you're walking through the desert, in a creative way, and how did you go to those valleys?
That's quite okay. I mean, we should allow ourselves to do that, but there are little things that you can do. You can think back on your influences, or you could just keep doing it. Every day, do something small, and that takes you, sort of walks you through your studio, and something will come eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let me ask you this question. Maybe we'll start from there. Do you believe that inspiration is a requirement for the artist?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question.
Send you a trouble, no,
like
baseball.
I don't recall who quoted it, but they said, inspiration is for amateurs.
That was Chuck Close.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, not entirely sure what that meant, but I think it was just the fact that you do it, you get out and you do it, you just keep doing it. Influence or inspiration comes, but it's not all inspiration. You have to act on it. What was the question again? You want to tell me that again?
Yeah. Do you believe inspiration is a requirement for the artist for the art making?
Well, I think so. I think in many ways, this and I know this. You have to be inspired in what you're doing. and to keep you doing what you do every day. If I'm working on a set of paintings and eventually a set or a series of paintings will sort of peter out at some point. Your influence or your inspiration for doing it, you start to lose it. Other things come in, other, studio issues and inspiration from other sources comes in. And that focus that you had at one point, it just, it starts to wane and you move on, you move through it. But I think you have to be inspired, definitely.
Yeah.
You can't stand it. Otherwise, we're just painting widgets. We're just like a production line, and you don't want to be there. That's probably the worst place to be.
Exactly. No, I do believe that too. And sometimes I think of, the role of inspiration in a, as we also move into contemporary practices where, we're using assistants, for example, who I have the idea, but they do all the painting, right? For some of the artists that, are out there who, they become like studio managers in a way, but somebody else is doing the work, right? is that still inspired art? Yes, exactly, right? And many others. One can argue yes in both ways, but I think it's just kind of an interesting concept, this idea of the role of inspiration. But I think, I do. I believe in it.
So you go into the studio. Do you stay until that inspiration kind of leaves you for the day or for the week that you're working? Do you just put things aside eventually when that inspiration is not as strong?
Yeah, I think the way I see it, like in my case, when inspiration is not there, then commitment has to has to stand up in place and say, I might not be today feel so inspired, but my commitment to my art requires me to do some work. It could be that day that I just clean up, or that I'm just looking at books, to get ideas.
So that's just discipline.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's learning discipline, sidelining inspiration. The inspiration brings you into the studio. Discipline keeps you working.
That's correct. I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah. No.
So your inspirations of late? What's your inspirations?
What is inspiring me right now? Well, this is actually a great question. My studio is over there, and you've been here in my home in Chicago, and so my studio is right there. I can see it. And this morning,
great little studio.
Yeah, I was working in right there. And so on one wall, I have like maybe 20 sheets of paper, about 20 by 24. All like taped up in the wall, like if it was like one giant painting. And right now what I'm doing is I'm kind of working like energy-wise, like dropping paint and letting things happen in a more intuitive way. That's the season where I am in right now, because some more of the back end story about some changes in my life right now and things. So
yes,
so I'm right now, I feel kind of a little bit in the balance, of those changes. So I feel that this kind of intuitive work with no deadline, no objective, is helping me to keep things going.
Is that inspiration or is that just commitment?
I think it's a little bit of both. The commitment makes me walk in there and dab in the paint, but then I look at one of those panels and I start to get inspired by what I see.
Of course.
Yeah. So
and then that inspiration it's a seed. That's a seed of inspiration. And then that will fill, the body of work.
Exactly. Eventually. Yeah. Because what I'm wanting to do with this is at some point I'll take them all down, and then they will become individual pieces in which I can work on one at a time, and then be inspired by what I see in the surface,
That's true. Yeah, I have, like in my case, in my studio, I've got 2 older paintings sitting here, which I'm considering repainting, which is not a problem. I have never have a problem with painting over work. If I just know that the inspiration wasn't there initially in the first paintings, they can be always painted over. And it's my work. I can do whatever I want with it. but I've had them sitting for 2 weeks now against the wall, and they're pretty dominant. They're
big.
6 by 6 feet each, so there's two of them. So it's a 12-foot piece that's sitting there.
Wow.
And I look at it every day, waiting for perhaps that inspiration.
Yeah.
You know, and I know it will come. Eventually it will come. If I pass that painting, you know, as many times as I do during the day, eventually it does.
Do you turn the paintings around to see,
of course,
if they you know, something triggers something by looking at a different direction?
Yeah, and we have stuff in our studios, right? That's a distraction. So I have this center table, and it's hidden by the table. It's like against the far wall. So today I woke up this morning and I thought, you know, maybe I'll just remove the table just for now, so I can see these paintings, you know, full on. They're right there, and if I, you know, have that inspiration, I'm not sort of crowding in behind a table to paint.
Yeah,
I can immediately go for it.
Right. No, that's very cool. And you know, today you posted a picture on Instagram, which I was looking at it. Then I pinched in, you know, to zoom in, and I saw that in one table by the window you had like a whole number of
little mechanical dolls.
Yeah, the wooden dolls like you use for drawing. And I was with my daughter and like, hey, Naya, take a look at what Drew has on his table. And she's like, oh my God, that is so cool. I bet he was playing with them today.
No. See, that's an old photo, mind you. But you know, it's a good point. These are the kinds of things that create inspiration.
Yeah.
And I think it was I was given a box of those little mannequins. When a college closed down or a program closed down, I can't recall. Maybe that was 5 years ago, and I've had them in a box since. And I keep, you know, pulling them out and thinking there's got to be something I can do with that. With these very simple things, we'll eventually make something.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they were fun. It's kind of like the element of play, you know, being playful in the studio. It's okay, you know, and
well, this is it, you know, and again, we're talking about our influences today, right? I've always seen myself as a wannabe installation artist, you know.
Okay.
I love installation. I like creating stories with found objects, that kind of thing. I don't do a lot of it, but I'm hoping to move in that direction. But back in the probably 1979.
Yeah.
I went to visit an artist named Victor Tinkle. You just reminded me of this. And the guy's name is just crazy to begin with. But he had a place outside Toronto. And he would pay his kids, when they could get off the bus at the end of the road, this was a rural area, he would give them, at the time, I think it was 5 cents per pop can that they would collect on their way home. And then he would take the pop cans and cut them up. And he created this thing called the Parade Series. And it was little people out of the pop cans. And in his studio, there must have been 5,000 of them.
Wow.
All along the floor. And it was called the Parade Series. And I thought, that's amazing. You know, just taking something that was trash and making it into sort of a full story.
Yeah.
So this is why I continually think about that influence when I pull out things like the mannequins. You know, and that stays with me.
Yeah, because I think influence drives us to inspiration, right?
Of course.
Points us towards inspiration. And I'm sure like in different seasons in life, there's different things that have inspired you and have inspired me. And, you know, for the friends who have been following me and following you for a while, they kind of know like when our stories converge a couple years ago. And, you know, for me, like you were an inspiration before I knew you through your paintings. So your paintings inspired me at a season in life when I was at school.
Thank you.
And I wanted to be an artist, and I wanted to also continue with my love for design. And I found it was an interesting era because I don't think I maybe told you this, but like that was back in early 90s. and I was in art school. And back then, when you went to art school, you had to decide either you're going to be a graphic designer or a painter or a sculptor. You had to pick something. You cannot have like this multidisciplinary aspect. Like now it's more common in their practice, but back then it was pretty hard cut. So I had graphic design 2 days and I had painting 2 different days, like Monday, Wednesday painting.
Wow, we have such similar history.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So then what happened is Tuesday and Thursday when I went to my graphic design class, it was in a different building. I had to be neat, and there was the guys in the class would like speak bad about the guys in the painting or department because they were all messy, and they would think they knew all that. They were lazy. I mean, we had like all this stuff. So then Monday, Wednesday, I would hear the other side of the story because the painters, would complain about the graphic designer. So I was myself in that kind of like bouncing back and forth, and it was kind of it was a rough year for me. I switched schools after that semester because I just couldn't handle it, and that's when I saw your paintings, and you were an artist who were both graphic designer and painter, and I think that's why your story, stuck in my head, and your name, which is very odd. I'm really bad with names, and it's very odd that I would remember somebody's name for 20 years. I hardly remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
For 10 months. So, that I think what really struck me is that connection between the two worlds, right? And like, well, if he can do it, I don't know who this guy is. If he can do it, I probably can do it too. And that kind of
clearly you have,
which is
and well beyond.
Yeah, and that rolled in that I went back to school and my studio, but that rolled in that inspiration that continued to keep me going, for the next few years, because I saw that it was actually possible that somebody had done it.
Well, I think and you and I, you went. What year were you in university?
Well.
92?
90s, yeah.
Yeah. See, I had done 79 to about 83, I think.
Yeah.
And I did both as well. I did the graphic design and the fine arts. And there was always that divide.
Yeah, right.
Although, in fact, I wanted to speak about this because I think at that point, I had a very small college. And so there was small attendance, probably maybe 40 kids at the time. And we had sort of one-on-one with our instructors. And a lot of these guys had come out of they were retired graphic designers that had become fine artists or sculptors, right? And we had sculptors, that were teaching design elements.
Yeah.
Right. It was a fantastic. So there was no divide. It was always, we spoke of the divide, but with, everyone, including our instructors, would say, absolutely not. Graphic design is as much an art as painting or as sculpting. I think you have to have that sort of broad range of influence, right? To really succeed. And I think I'm so fortunate. It sounds like you are as well. With the both disciplines and where it's taking you today. And I think that is, is really important. And as you say, today it's more acceptable. If you're a photographer or a printmaker, you're using all those mediums.
Exactly.
So, but 20, 30 years ago, there was a bit of, fine arts versus graphics. No way.
Yeah. I think it was like this idea.
Come together.
Yeah. Even this idea of the commercialization, right? Like, you're like too commercial. You're becoming
selling
the
was
money.
like
selling out
like
to the devil.
a faux pas. Like it was you don't sell out. Right?
Exactly.
You just create where you starve for the rest of your life. I thought, well, I'm not going to do that.
No, that's right. And that is for artists today. I think it's a wonderful thing that this multidisciplinary approach has become kind of a thing of today, and artists, nobody questions you anymore, and actually more considered an asset. The more tools that you bring into your art practice, the better, right? If you have a background in photography, if you have a background in carpentry, if you have a background or whatever, so many artists today bring that into the table and say, this is another tool, another asset, versus just a past life.
That's right.
How can I bring that in?
Look at filmmakers, the filmmakers they've got, they're projecting their films in fine art, in galleries, in museums as, considered sort of moving fine art. They aren't just simply a commercial filmmaker. So, the show I saw in Chicago at the time, it was Nick Cave's show. Incredible.
show.
We had moving video, we had sculpture, there was 3-dimensional work, installation. It was fantastic, all by one artist. So that multidiscipline, there was no divide.
Right. No, and that was a great show. So in your career, who has been, from the history of art or contemporary artists, who have been some of your influences or artists that you have looked up in terms of like maybe a certain something about a particular artist, dead or alive, that, has influenced you?
Yeah, well, that's a good question as well. I'm really not the type to, I've been in a way influenced by, the New York School of Abstraction, Klein. That's very obvious.
Right.
Rothko in my early days, I love the sort of serenity of his work and the quietness and that kind of thing. And I like that frenetic energy that Klein had. And then Motherwell was like this crazy painter, which I've never actually even tried to paint like that. More so, I think I was influenced by designers, really.
Really? Okay.
Graphic designers, type designers. I saw it as how I could use it in the fine arts.
That's interesting.
How could I employ text and type and writing or typographic design into a painting? And I did that. It was my very early work were sort of statement pieces. I didn't really get into painting until probably when you were just entering university. I was just starting to paint. So really, we were kind of sort of one-on-one there. But I think the biggest influence, and I think you might agree, is that it might not be the big guys that you see in museums, the Rothkos, although I did see the Rothko Chapel in Houston, and it was on a business trip during my graphic design days. So I saw that, and I was moved by the sort of spiritualism of it, the feel of it. I wasn't necessarily moved by the work itself. And I saw a lot of shows in New York and Toronto, and wherever I was traveling, I was always seeing shows. But I think the biggest influence was the one-on-one when I was a student, being invited to an artist studio. And there might be 6 or 8 of us, students, and we're kind of dragging our butts into these, one-on-one sessions with these artists. And, you kind of go like, do I have to go?
Yeah.
and then, by the time it was finished, they were having to remove us from the studio because we were so enthusiastic.
Wow.
And I think that, I went to one was John Boyle, Canadian painter. And he was a sort of crazy contemporary painter, very well recognized, lived in a church with his family and a studio and middle of nowhere. And I thought, wow, this is a life I want. This is what I want to do. And that influence stayed with me my entire career.
That's great.
And I'm not even sure if John is still alive, but his work was that he was pushing the boundaries with his work. So it was a complete package. I got to meet him. I got to see his lifestyle.
Right.
And I got to understand why he was pushing buttons, which influenced my work. Definitely.
And that inspired you, to...
Absolutely.
So,
and I think that one-on-one session, not unlike what we're doing now with Next Level and the, one-on-one personal sessions, has a greater influence, really, on artists that are, struggling through or needing sort of a direction and that kind of thing. It's a one-on-one. It's you have a dialogue,
right?
And that lasts forever.
And I think, those one-on-ones influences both, the one who's coming for advice and the one who's giving the advice.
Absolutely.
There's like an energy.
Yeah. And yours? So what were your influences?
Well, before I talk about mine, I wanted to ask you, as you were talking about typography, how typography and graphic design influence your painting, at what point, or, did the vertical line or horizontal, that the strong line comes to play in your loose abstraction work? Is that something that was from the beginning, or was something that, you're like, shoot, I'm gonna now do this forever?
Well, it's funny, again, I don't like to sign my paintings on the front of my canvas. I've always felt signatures were, distracting. You'd have this really great piece of work, and then you would have somebody's big, ornate signature at the bottom, and your eye was always drawn to that. And I was always like, couldn't you have done that on the back? I know who the artist is.
Yeah.
You don't need to tell me. And you don't need to tell anyone, because that your art should be unique enough. That is your signature. So I started doing little red lines on my work really early on. I just liked the focus of it. It was balancing points. And then I eventually, I think, I don't really even recall when I started doing it. I think it was just the show that I did in Chicago in '99. I started bringing in these vertical shards, like what I call a shard, but because it created a mystery to the work. It created a balancing point too, a focus on the work.
Yeah,
being sort of a color field abstractionist, the paintings are a little frenetic, and you're not really quite sure where your eye is supposed to land. Maybe that's a good thing. But the line allowed you to look at the line, focus on it, and then it's almost like a curtain. You want to look in behind that line, and that was really, again, influenced by sort of a technique, and trying to create something that wasn't there, as if the canvas had been cut without looking like the artist that does the cut paintings. And so it just started to become a signature, and it felt like it was the finishing point of that painting. Once I did that, painting was done.
It was done. That's interesting. That's interesting. That's really cool.
You?
Well, yeah, because like when I first saw your painting, that's what I remember even 20 years later when I look at your artwork back on Instagram. Like, oh, that's the guy, because I remember those lines, the same paintings. So,
yeah, but again, I think that acted as a signature, right? And I think
exactly
we both have the same. You have elements that I know of, and you should speak of here, because a lot of people might not recognize those tiny little elements that are yours and yours alone.
Right. No, so for me, so there's different people over the years that have influenced, inspired, kind of the work I do. I remember when I was at the Art Institute in Chicago, because we had passes to the school, we had passes to the museum, so we could walk into the museum for free anytime if you were a student of the Art Institute Chicago. So I was a student, and I would walk in to the painting department at the museum, and sometimes even when I have free time, I would just go and chill and just sit down and look at the work. And early on, I saw the work of Kerry James Marshall, which is an African-American artist who was doing back then these huge paintings. There were figures on them, and they were not on stretchers. They were kind of like loose. He used grommets, and his surface was paper adhered to canvas. And that was the first time I saw it, because I've always wanted
influence.
Yeah, I always wanted to work big, even as a student, but I always had the problem, I didn't live close to the university, so I had to travel. How do you travel with big stuff, right? You just can't. the studio at the school were too small, and then like, okay, when semester is over, what you do with these giant paintings? So that's when the first idea started to kick in of the larger scale paper over the canvas, right? That I saw from Kerry James Marshall's show. And then when I went continue, I was always fascinated with charcoal drawing. I love charcoal drawing, and that's when I was first introduced to Jim Dine and Jim's Dine drawings of the 80s, early 90s.
Same here, my friend.
An incredible draftsman. His drawings are to die for. So I remember, like, through school, I would go to the library and check out every Jim Dine book I had or they had in the library, and I would just bring it to my studio, and for weeks I would just look at those beautiful drawings. So even today, the way I start a painting, usually I start with charcoal drawing, even though the painting later doesn't look anything like the charcoal drawing. But I love the immediacy of, I think, the charcoal. And because, again, I work a lot with the computers and design and all that, because, I do a lot of that for myself and for programs and things like that, just like you. We love that stuff. For me, like, the charcoal was like a way of touching the surface and getting my hands dirty. And
it gets you in the flow, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It gets the hand and the arm moving again. If it's been, all you've been doing is playing with a mouse.
Exactly.
Then the charcoal allows that sort of rotator cuff, start to move, right? And once you get moving, ideas come.
Exactly.
Flow starts to happen. Yeah, for sure.
So Jim Dine was a big influence on that front. So,
but he wasn't necessarily a figurative painter.
No, it was just
he did all of the hearts and
the hearts.
He did these beautiful. Well, he was a master colorist.
Right. Yeah. The robes, the series of robes.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, right.
And there was a book that I really love. It was a book of just tools. He was drawing tools like pliers, screwdrivers, just charcoal, beautiful, amazing drawings. And then he was doing figures too, like portraits, people he knew. So that he did a lot of self-portraiture. So the actual figure. So I wanted to work large. So there were the various elements, right? Large, the scale, the charcoal, the immediacy of that element. And then the figures started to happen. I guess I've always been attracted to figure, to figure, symbolism.
And that influence, though, I think is a really important part of the story as well.
Yeah.
Tell us why. I know what it is, but I think it's a really important part of your early career. And then in stemming back probably right to your, just shortly after birth.
Yeah. It is. The figure, I think, comes back even from my days in Mexico, looking at the muralist painters, Diego Rivera, this whole history of figurative work, and being that everywhere, I think that something that just stayed with me. It was kind of a way to look back at identity,
Yeah.
Some of my earliest works here in the United States were about identity, like, who am I? What am I doing here? So some of my really, really early work, it has like Aztec symbols, stuff like that. Because, as an immigrant, you kind of go through those phases where you dream about the past, right? So, but then
we never leave our home. We never leave our actual, birthplace.
Right, exactly.
We take it with us, and we try to keep a part of it. It's important, And I think being an expat, I know that.
Yeah.
My identity is different now because I'm still Canadian, but I live in another,
right.
Essentially on the other side of the planet.
Exactly.
So, but your influences came from something else.
So that was, it's like a mixture of things, right? So that, then also the spiritual aspect of things was super important for me. And so that's when the figure, it was not about making somebody's portrait or how they look like, but to me it was about how it felt like, the presence. And so I always question, like, how do I paint presence? That feeling, like, let's say I meet you in person, there's a certain presence that is felt that when you're gone, after the meeting, you you
There's
can
an energy there.
remember that exactly. So
Yeah, absolutely.
and that I think that's where my figures started to become more universal, more like silhouettes, halos or whatever you want to call them, more loose. Yeah, because of that, I wanted to really explore
That keeps you. I think that kept you connected back to your homeland of Mexico, to your family, to your father and mother, of course, right? And that whole, I think maybe there was a sense of you needed that spiritualism to keep you
right,
sort of grounded in otherwise a completely foreign land. You went from Mexico to Chicago.
right.
It was, wow, two different worlds. So,
Exactly.
any way that keeps us sort of spiritually sort of connected, I think. And that can be in a number of ways, but I think that figure probably held, quite a lot of importance to you because those figures perhaps were even people that you knew or from those days in Mexico, if I could be so presumptuous.
Well, they were actually never anybody in particular. The first ones were me, because I didn't have any models. So all my paintings, they're life size, because this is what I would do in the studio at school. After everybody left, I would stay at the end so they wouldn't make fun of me. And I would like pose and just trace myself with the charcoal all around, and that would trace the figure. Like, there you go, now I got a figure, and it's life size. So then I would put myself in different poses. The biggest painting I did at Last Supper, full size, like 17 feet wide. And I posed for every figure, from the Christ at the center to all the disciples all around, I actually posed. And
That's so funny.
I wish we had TikTok back then. That would have been a good one. But
wouldn't it? Yeah. Yeah. What were we doing? We were using cameras then, to take the shots.
Exactly.
And then tracing our shadows.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think that those influences and they last with you forever, and I don't see you stopping, you're still work on the figure.
Right.
And that's still a big, important thing to you. Probably the most important element, really.
Yeah. I feel that, and for the season, I removed the figure for a while. I think it was last year. And I told you after I'm done, I need to go back to the figures. I feel like I'm dry.
It's drawing you back in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's so true.
It's like your line.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I tried as well, maybe 2 years ago, to try to eliminate the line, because I felt like people were focusing on that rather than the work itself and my applications.
Other elements.
And that line, I intentionally tried to eliminate, and it was uncomfortable. It was like handing away your identity.
Right. Yeah.
And it kept gnawing at me. So every painting I did, and for the Chicago show, the recent Chicago show, that line came back into it again.
Yeah.
Because it's a comfort level for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, we have to keep those things that keep us comfortable, recognize signatures.
And it's part of our language,
Yeah, sure.
It's part of our visual language. So that we have been creating over time, that, it's you, it's your voice, your tone of voice.
And this, if I may add, this is something interesting, because we were talking about, we mentioned earlier about the one-on-one sessions. Now, this is often what is brought to me, and I think to you as well, when we have people, sign up for the 1 hour or 2 hour sessions, whichever, they come with a thing saying, well, I do this, but I want to move, out of that. And sometimes it's us to say, wait a minute, I think what you've got here is you've got a very strong element that is uniquely you, right?
Right.
So can you move in a new direction as you wish, but retain the most important aspects? And that I think is, is oftentimes like you and I, you said you drop the figure, and sometimes maybe isn't the wisest thing. we do it because that's our most recognizable element. Like me with a line, you with the figure. You drop it, and all of a sudden our identity gets slightly lost.
Right.
You know, so bring it back, but then change the inspiration. So, or the series, you know, whatever you're creating in that new series, if you're making new colors or new materials, but keep the elements that are strong.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And, you know, glad that you brought in the one-on-ones, because something that comes often in those conversations, you know, working with another artist, a lot of times because we are working in the studio, you know, one of the comments, for example, the artist says, you know what, Sergio, I feel like all over the place, you know, I look at my work, it's all over the place. But then when I look at it, because I'm not the artist, I'm like, well, you know, there are actually, I see a lot of things that are in common, you know, there are certain similarities, but maybe you see it totally different because you're looking at it every day, that, you know, you kind of have blurred some of those figures or lines or whatever, things that bring things together. And it's so helpful to bring those in conversation with somebody else that can help you and look at your work objectively, look at your work in a different way, look at your work, you know, with really another point of view. Yeah, exactly. That sometimes it's already there, but you just don't see it.
Yeah, well, these strengths and weaknesses. Well, you know, you and I know in our long careers what our strengths are. And, you know, we have to, but we're also creative. We want to move ahead. We want to move, you know, sometimes we get bored or tired of doing the same thing. So we want to move something ahead. But it's crucial not to lose that one fingerprint that is yours. You know, we've taken a whole career to develop the figure, for example, in how you create the figure. That's uniquely you. My little line, that's a signature. The bars in my work, that's a signature. We have to maintain those, I think. I can spot us, you know, Sergio Gomez painting anywhere now. Now that I know your work, and there's certain little elements in there that repeating because they're important. They're important.
Right.
And I think most people would with my work as well. Although I have gone, you know, I've tried to push it so that there's no bars, there's no vertical lines, there isn't anything that's recognizably me. And I'm never 100% satisfied. I always come back. I have to always come back to it.
It's like the Godfather. You think you're out, and they'll pull you back in.
It's a big comfy chair. And that's, you know, that's the comfy chair in my studio. It's a place of safety, right?
Right.
And oftentimes these artists that we speak with, you know, they don't, they're trying to remove themselves from a very important part in their style. And I always say, wait a minute, don't go removing yourself. You can go around the subject matter,
right?
But keep that one element that is your, you know, grounding, right? And it's oftentimes when they come back, they go, you know, absolutely, I thought I had to change everything. I say, no, you don't. Keep what you've got. You know,
and that's the value of sitting with somebody for 1 hour or two and talking about it. Go diving deeper, because you can always, like, you know, somebody makes a comment on social media, but it's not a critique. It's not an in-depth chat as when you actually sit with somebody, talk about it, and you know, really diving deeper, you know, to find where things come from.
And you, as you see, and I've seen, these artists that we've got, some of these artists that at least I've worked with, a good percentage of them are working on stuff right now, and they're not releasing it yet because it's a challenge. They're challenging themselves. They're moving forward, right? They're creating something new. I'm so excited to see what happens when they finally say, here it is.
This is it. Yeah.
Because it's a natural, I think, and they came up with it. It's not me. I'm just a sounding board. I just see what is elements that are important. Like you know what they're doing in their social media, that is, and their marketing and that kind of thing, that is their strength.
Right.
And you put their weaknesses, perhaps they're not as important. So move those into strengths,
Right.
into various areas. So this is really what we do as the one-on-one.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I love it too. And what's beautiful about it is that it works in all levels of your art career. If you're an emerging artist, the benefit of sitting with somebody one-on-one is just as good as if you have been making art for a long time and you're seasoned in your career and you still want that kind of fine-tuning in one aspect or another. And at the end, it's something that we all look forward to as well. I mean, you have coached me in many ways as well, and vice versa. I think we all need that help.
Outside influence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I remember a story. I have to tell you this because I think the biggest influence on me initially was a friend of mine, and I ended up becoming a roommate in college with this guy.
Okay.
He was slightly older than all of us in like a fourth year program, and I was like the newbie starting in the first year.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how things happen. I love drawing, right? That was really what I'd gone in to do. And I had been dating his roommate, which was a woman. And we were in our teens, I think. And it was one snowy night. She had brought his car to pick me up, and we were driving around. We went to dinner or whatever we were doing. And that night I drove the car home because of the snowstorm. I ended up taking this fella's keys for his car home with me that night, which was way across town.
Okay.
And the next morning, I get this guy traipsing up the driveway, snow everywhere, knocking on the door. He goes, "Are you Drew?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "I think you have my car keys."
Oh, no.
And so I said, "Oh my God, you're that guy,
You're that guy.
So I went up, I got the keys, and I said, "You must come in, get warm, have some coffee."
Yeah.
And we immediately became friends. And
because you stole his keys.
Because they stole his keys, and he needed his car back. And I happened to have, just right at the same time, these little pen and ink drawings. This is well before even college. So I might have only been 18, maybe.
Wow. Okay.
I had been doing these little pen and ink drawings of like landscapes, and he saw them and he said, "These are really good. Why don't you go to art college?" And I said, "Well, I'd have to go in sort of as a mature student. I've been out of the schooling for a couple of years." And he said, "Hey, just come and see the college."
Really?
And I did. And I ended up rooming with him for about 2 years.
Wow.
From the college days. And he was my biggest influence. This guy could draw like Michelangelo. He was an amazing drawer. He never pursued it. After college, he didn't really do anything. But anyway, this is the kind of thing that can come along.
Yeah.
Still to this day, every time I look at a Michelangelo drawing or a Leonardo drawing, I think of that guy.
Remind you, that is great.
Yeah, and it's all really great thoughts. This guy was amazing, but it's one of those little early influences that all he did was guide me into taking me one step further, going to college. Why don't you go to college? Go in,
Yeah.
And I did.
And in the reverse, we're talking about how we have been influenced ourselves, but also sometimes just one word of, encouragement that we give to somebody can turn the coin.
Do you have any examples?
Well, to me, it was like just like you, it was like in high school where my high school teacher is the one who really turned me into art because I didn't know what I was going to do after high school because I had come to the United States just 2 years prior as a junior. So I was still learning English. My GPA was like on the floor, I was no college material by any means because of the language barrier, and just knowing how to apply to school financially, none of that. My parents did not speak English either. So I was the translator, me learning English. So my high school teacher, he saw that because I took art class in high school, and he saw that I had talent of, I guess, of some sort. And he first sent me to a art camp. So
Wow.
1 year, he's like, Sergio, we got a scholarship, sign here. And I signed, and he filled out the paperwork, and he sent me to art camp. So I went to art camp, and it was fun. And then next year, when I became a senior, he asked me, he said, Sergio, so what are you going to do? I said, well, I don't know. He's like, well, have you considered an art career? I said, well, I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking like design or the architecture or something. He's like, why don't you go to community college, take all the classes there, and then you decide what you want to do. And that's really what I did. And that was the best advice I ever got. He didn't send me to a big school. He sent me to a local community college where he knew I wouldn't get lost.
As did I. Yeah.
And get, discouraged. But that's exactly what I needed. I actually became really great friends with all my college professors and community college, which then they became exhibiting artists in my gallery many years later.
Again, I'm surprised at these coincidences. We just keep. I've known you now for 3 years. I talk to you almost every day. We always are chatting about business or art or something, creative. And I didn't know that. And I also, as I mentioned, I went to the college and I had these instructors that, it was just, these guys were all retired business guys, right? They were really not educated in education, as and a number of them ended up traveling across to Asia with me.
Oh, wow.
Later in life, and doing shows here. I mean, they became colleagues rather than the teacher student divide.
Right.
Now they were very close friends, and some of them I still keep in contact with.
And I think that's a very cool very cool thing for an instructor to see your students, become your colleagues, and
absolutely,
and then collaborate.
And that's all they want. That's what they want, is for you to succeed.
Exactly.
And then again, back to the one-on-one. This is what I hope, and I think what you hope, and Dr. Yanina, we hope that we're going to have that one little influence,
right,
to set you on your way. And
absolutely,
in 5 years' time, we see you showing somewhere with that influence of that one or two meetings.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to open up and to create a dialogue.
I think so. And I think that's a great way to kind of wrap up or chat, which I think we've been at it for about an hour, probably almost, I think. So it's good. That's good. But we need to leave some topics for the future. So
that's true.
We want to invite our friends, if you would like to line up, schedule a one-on-one mentoring coaching session with Drew or I or my wife, Dr. Ana Gomez. Drew focuses on all aspects of the creative studio, creative life, organization, productivity in your studio, coming up with ideas, inspiration, everything that we talk about today. I focus on the business aspects, marketing, working with galleries, anything that you need to run your business smoothly. And Dr. Ana Gomez, she focuses on mindset, wellness. And if you would like to line up for a session with us, all you got to do is go to our website at theartistnextlevel.com. You will find a link also at the bottom of this video or in the description of the podcast. Check that out. We'd love to work with you as well. And one quick announcement before we go, which Drew will take part of that. In April, we're going to be doing a challenge inside the Art Next Level on building a body of work. So if you're looking into building a body of work and knowing what to do with it, how to start, how to get it out there into the world, take out our challenge in April. It's going to be good. And Drew will be on that as well.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun.
Well, thank you, my friend. As always, I mean, we could literally talk for hours.
Yeah.
Which we often do.
Excellent.
And by the way, this is the drink of choice, vitamin C water.
Very good. Maybe one of these days we'll talk about our favorite drinks to keep us going.
We talked about food before, so that could be another topic. But thank you. And again, this is a great opportunity for you and I to just share some of the things we've done, and let's hope we've inspired and helped another artist.
Absolutely,
really to the next level.
Absolutely. So, my friend, if you enjoyed this episode, please do us a big favor, share it with all your friends. That's the best way that you can help us out to get this word to others. And of course, please either message Drew through Instagram at Drew Harris Art, or me on Instagram, Sergio Gomez Art, and tell us how you like these episodes, and also tell us what you would like us to talk about. I think that would be really fun. So, thank you, my friend. Thank you, Drew. We'll see you guys.
Thank you, sir.
I'll see you at the next level. Goodbye.
Check out our website at www.theartistnextlevel.com, where you will find our podcast library, learn about our upcoming webinars, find resources relevant to your career, and much more. Thanks for listening to today's podcast, and we'll see you at the next level.